The general thesis of the 8th Habit book is simply this. Most companies today are still leading from an industrial age model of leadership rather than an information age model of leadership. Now, in the 20th century, most large companies place the number one priority in their organization around their production process, their ability to produce goods and services. That was their number one priority. This leads to a highly controlling environment of standard operating procedures and controls and systems, and a managing style that tightly controls the process to make sure we're getting maximum productivity. Now, this is in sharp contrast to an information age model of leading people, a 21st century model, if you will. Because in an information age company, the number one priority is not your production process anymore, it's your people. And it's the knowledge they have and the empowerment that you give them to get things done. Now, based on all that I have read and all that I know about leadership today, which is not that much, this critical issue of making this transition from an industrial age model to an information age model is the critical decision that every company in this room today must make if you're going to reach your maximum potential. And if you're unwilling to make that transition, I'm going to be honest with you today, good to great is not for you. You may be satisfied with being just a good company, making a good profit, a good bottom line. Things seem to be going well. Good to great is about more than that. And it will require you to transition from the old model to the new model. Now, my personal experience of working for 3 of these Fortune 500 companies over a 10-year period of time taught me this. They were all 3 good companies, but they had an industrial age model of leadership. And what that means is, the bottom line is, they designed all their systems around primarily preventing failure rather than ensuring success. And I can tell you there's a tremendous difference between the two. And what happens is you end up with a codependent culture between management and the workforce that severely limits productivity of both groups. Because what happens is this: when you're in an industrial age model, your number one priority is designing your systems around preventing failure. You're going to align everything in that way. And you're not going to want to take the risk that you're going to have to take to change with the culture that happens in the marketplace. Now, when these systems are designed around preventing failure, again, everything focuses in on that. And you're going to hire a level of management within your organization that's primary responsibility is to catch people making mistakes, because that's your priority. Now, think about this for a minute. If you do this, you have empowered an entire level of your organization of middle management that cannot be personally successful unless they catch someone else doing something wrong, and then they create policies and procedures to enthrone this failing mentality into the DNA of your entire company. And that happens over and over and over again. And in this kind of model, again, people are viewed as tools as a part of the production process, not as your primary asset. And the mentality begins to develop with your workforce. Hey, look, I'm not going to take any personal initiative. I'm not going to assume any responsibility. I'm not going to take any chances. I'm not going to risk a failure situation in this failure-driven mentality system. And when that begins to set in, that just fuels the conviction in management's part. Look at these people. They're not going to take initiative. They're not going to step out and assume responsibility. Therefore, what do they need? They need more controls. They need more systems. They need more meetings. And we have to tighten this thing up if we're ever going to get anything done around here. That's why it's so codependent. Look in your notes on page 3. Covey gives the bottom line for the industrial age model of leadership. Each party's weakness reinforces and ultimately justifies the other's behavior. The more a manager controls, the more he or she evokes behavior that necessitate greater control or managing. The codependent culture that develops is eventually institutionalized to the point that no one takes responsibility. They disempower themselves by believing that others must change before their own circumstances can improve. Now, this fundamental shift between an industrial age model of leadership and an information age model of leadership, and the willingness on the part of leaders to take risk short-term for long-term success, form the crux of what Good to Great is all about.